Randy Eccles. I'm the general manager and publisher of NPR Illinois, 91.9 UIS. And this is our Illinois Issues Forum, sponsored by AARP Illinois. And we're really happy that you came tonight. We're looking for a very civil conversation, but a really frank conversation about how the budget impasse is impacting us here in Illinois. We have a great panel, and Sean Crawford will be moderating for us in just a moment. He'll start with our panel and introduce them. Sean is our host of Illinois Edition, our midday show that's on at noon weekdays and also on at 7 o'clock with a replay. We do plan to record this, and we will probably, at the very least, we'll have it online, and if we can edit it into an appropriate form, it'll be on air also. So thank you again for coming. We really appreciate you listening to NPR Illinois, and I'd like to also now introduce Bob Gallo, the State Director of AARP Illinois, for a couple more comments. Thank you.
Randy, and thank you all for being here, because your presence here indicates that you care about this state and you are concerned with what's going on and what's not happening. So this is the first of 11 forums we're going to be doing around the state with our friends at NPR in Illinois. And we basically coined the campaign name called Enough is Enough. ARP is a nonpartisan organization. We do not support candidates for office, but we're concerned about issues for adults age 50 plus and their families. And in talking to my colleagues across the nation, ARP has state offices in every state in the United States, including the District of Columbia, including Puerto Rico, and including the U.S. Virgin Islands. Illinois is the only state in the United States that cannot seem to pass a budget. It's ridiculous. So we're saying enough is enough. And what we're doing is, via these forums and these broadcasts and us reaching out to our 1.7 million AARP members in Illinois alone, is we're going to ask them to challenge their elected legislators and the governor, and to go to those individuals who are representing them and saying, what is your plan to put Illinois back on the right fiscal path again? What is your plan to get a budget passed in Illinois? No excuses about elections, no excuses about ideologies. You need to put people above politics, because people are hurting across this state in ways that maybe you know about or maybe you don't. And let me tell you something, if you're not feeling the effects of this now, you will. Our universities, their bond ratings are being downgraded to junk. Our students, or those who want to go to universities, are considering going out of state because they don't think they're going to have a bright future by going to a school in Illinois. We have individuals who traditionally would get Meals on Wheels 5 days a week or 7 days a week, and agencies that are doing that service for the state, individuals are getting meals maybe 1 or 2 days a week. It's wrong. Nonprofits all across Illinois, who are the organizations that deliver vital services for people of all ages, are laying people off, taking out lines of credit, in some cases personal lines of credit. They can't hire new people, and some are closing. Adult daycare services in the Peoria area, where you would drop a loved one off, whether it was a spouse or an older parent, so you could go to work and go about your day-to-day, and that person could be cared for instead of being left home unattended, have closed their doors. So tonight what we want to hear is from our distinguished panel about what they're hearing too. But what we really want you to do is to share your stories. And what I'd also like you to do, if you haven't already, there's a petition on the table in the back there, and if you pick one up on your way out, or just don't pick one up but sign it, we're going to deliver these all across the state, because we want you to say, and we're going to keep saying, enough is enough, this has to be fixed. So thank you for being here for tonight, and I'm grateful for your presence, your interest, because I know you want this to change too. Thank you.
All right, hopefully everybody can hear me okay? Okay. I might warn the panel just to bring the mics a little closer to you, just in case. Good evening. Thank you for coming. As was mentioned, as Bob and Randy mentioned, I'm Sean Crawford. I'm the news director here at NPR Illinois and Illinois Issues, and we are the public radio station here in Springfield. We've been around for over 40 years now, and in every one of those years, there's been a state budget, except for last year and this year, so things are a little different. Illinois has gone 22 months now without a state budget, a full budget for the state, and the goal tonight is to hear from you about how the lack of that budget has impacted you. Maybe it's your job, your business, maybe it's healthcare costs, maybe you're a student and have a lot of uncertainty. We're looking at having a dialogue tonight, and in a few minutes, I'll ask if anyone wants to give their story. First, I'm going to introduce our panel, though, and again, we'll have people with microphones out there, so all you have to do is raise your hand. They'll come around to you, so we'll hear from you in just a moment. But first, let me start with our panel, and what I'm going to do is, after I introduce each one, I'd like for them to give just maybe a couple of minutes about what they're seeing, the budget impasse, the impact it's having in the areas they work and cover. We start out with Howard Peters. He's the president of HAP Incorporated, a consulting and advocacy service working primarily in areas of criminal justice, human services, and healthcare. For 12 years, he was an executive vice president for the Illinois Hospital Association, and his state government experience includes being the first Illinois Department of Human Services secretary. He's also a former director for the Illinois Department of Corrections, and before that, he was a prison warden. And I've been told he's also an assistant pastor at the Fresh Visions Community Church, where he regularly preaches and teaches, and maybe he can bring some divine intervention to what's going on in state government. Howard Peters, please.
Good evening. Anyone who wants to meet me and hear a sermon after this, I'll be over in the right corner. I really do appreciate the opportunity to interact with you today. I think it's always good to be in the presence of people who care about their community and what's going on across their state. And so this is an important opportunity to interact with you. I spent, as it's already been said, a long time in state government, and now I provide consulting services for organizations that do mental health work, substance abuse work, who do criminal justice work, and who provide health care. And I can tell you that this is having a devastating effect on providers of services across the state. And the extent to which it's impacting on providers, of course, is impacting people who are intended to be the beneficiaries of those services. The quality of life is deteriorating as a result. Mental health organizations that I've been involved with are closing or reducing care. And imagine trying to attract quality physicians and psychiatrists to come to work in services that are supported or intended to be supported substantially by state government, or try to attract someone to come into this state to take an important position. So I can tell you from my experience that the quality of service and thereby the quality of life and the impact that it's having on people is declining in the state of Illinois, and it's all man-made. It's a crisis, a disaster in some instances that's created by the people that we elect and that represent us to these various offices, the legislature and the executive branch. One thing I will say and pass the microphone is that the saying that there is a reason that there is a saying that the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And the reason that there is that saying is because the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And I say that in meaning to you is that a big part of the problem at the moment is that ordinary people, voters, are not raising their voices enough to create enough tension on the decision makers to feel that now is the time that they must act. Having spent time in state government as I have, and having worked in a governor's office, I can tell you that letters matter, that phone calls matter, that emails matter. We had a situation where we had someone read every single letter, and when letters came in on the same subject, they went all the way to the attention of the governor, the chief of staff, the deputy chiefs of staff, and so on. So don't think that there's nothing that you can do. Don't think that your voice doesn't matter. Your legislator, your senator, your representative needs to hear from you and needs to hear from your neighbors, as does the administration, the governor's office. So please don't just be outraged. Act and make sure that the people that you elect hear from you, and that they understand, as Bob was mentioning, that you're not wanting to hear that it's someone else's fault. You elected them to represent you and to deliver for you. Thank you very much, and I look forward to interacting further.
Thanks, Howard. And now let's go to the other end of the table. Jonathan Lackland is here, and appreciate him coming tonight. He is Director of State Government Relations at Illinois State University. And of course, higher education has been hit pretty hard in the current budget impasse. His duties include advising the President, Board of Trustees, and university staff on issues relating to the General Assembly and state government. And before this role, he worked for the Illinois Board of Higher Education, providing legislative guidance to that board. And he also spent time with the Illinois Department of Transportation and has been involved with several nonprofits. Jonathan.
You know, first of all, I just want to say thank you to you. The fact that you're here this evening says that, A, you're concerned. You could have been a million different places, but you chose to be here tonight. This is extremely important. Excuse me. We are at an absolute impasse. And I see it in higher education, obviously. And at the end of the day, we have seen a lot of finger pointing. Our job right now is to make sure that we're holding those folks that we've put in office accountable. There's a saying, it's called accountability to the taxpayer. And I've talked to a lot of taxpayers, and they don't feel the folks that we've elected are accountable to us. So at the end of the day, this dialogue is going to be extremely, extremely important. You know, we hear the numbers bantered back and forth in terms of is higher ed effective or not. Well, let me just say this to you. We understand that right now, Illinois is #2. We are the second largest net exporter of students, second only to New Jersey. Now, at the end of the day, we've had some finger pointing our way in terms of what are we doing as higher ed to keep those students here. At the end of the day, we get the phone calls from parents. We get the phone calls from students that ask us one simple question. If I stay in Illinois and you do not continue to get a budget, will my degree have any value ever? Are you going to be open? For any public institution, for any higher ed institution, period, to have to endure that question is absolutely unconscionable. And at the end of the day, we're at a point where we're pushing our legislators and we're pushing the governor to make sure that they understand the value of higher education. And so I appreciate the fact that you're here. I'm really excited about the dialogue that I know is going to take place. And again, thanks.
Thanks, Jonathan. And finally, last but not least, a voice that you're familiar with if you're an NPR Illinois listener or listener of public radio in the state, Amanda Vinicky. She's covered politics and government for our station and other public stations in the state for over a decade. She covered the impeachment of the former governor, Rod Blagojevich. She was recognized nationally for her work, including coverage of utilities and much more. Amanda, this year, unfortunately for us, moved to Chicago to continue covering public affairs on the public TV station, WTTW, and their program, Chicago Tonight. Amanda Vinicky.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be back here with Sean and all of you. I have to say I have missed the Illinois Public Radio airwaves and our fine state capitol. I did, of course, insist this afternoon on getting Magic Kitchen for lunch. So, one of the other things I really miss about not being in Springfield. I guess my message, I am a natural optimist, but I don't think that I can have that message at this point in time. As you've heard from Howard and Jonathan, that need to really speak out and to be outraged. That is, I think, part of the issue that now we have gone, is Sean put it 22 months, but another way, if you sort of an inauspicious day, we're at 666 days without a budget in Illinois right now. And at this point in time, there's clearly a lot of pain. There are a lot of institutions that have closed their doors or fear that they will have to and are on the cusp of such. And yet, for many people, the sky hasn't fallen. It is, I think, for many people seen as, gosh, there's those Illinois politicians again. They just can't get their act together. And it's sort of shrugged off with annoyance, but also, well, that's just how things go around here. And it has become a new normal to not have a budget. And that is very much by design. I think that you have had the Rauner administration working very hard to keep things going as best as possible, even without a budget, for a couple of reasons. Number one, because they're important services, but number two, also, nobody wants to wear the jacket for that. But because you haven't seen any total dismantling of these institutions, it's just a drug treatment center closes here or there, and that is somebody's loved one maybe doesn't get treatment, and that's pain for a particular family, a community, maybe somebody who works there. That's not an impact that you immediately feel statewide. And so because there hasn't been that sort of change, again, I think that people are just accustomed to it. Again, I'll use the term a new normal. My perspective is a bit in the lion's den, kind of. Really, actually, if you ever come to the press room in the Capitol, we're in the basement bunker down there. It really is a den. And that's what we're seeing is, at this point, there, on all sides, of course, calls to end this impasse, to stop. And yet, you aren't getting any of that actual change because both sides aren't willing to give in and reach a compromise. Today, you did have the governor and House Speaker meet. I don't know if you've listened to the newscast yet or what you've heard, but that did occur this morning. That was the first time in 2017. The two most powerful politicians in the state of Illinois haven't been together face-to-face for an actual meeting, and we are nearly in May. I mean, that's pretty insane. Period, but particularly, of course, given the trouble that Illinois is in right now. I'm not sure there are any big takeaways. How I wish that I could have been there, but I don't think anybody is really going to actually be able to tell you what went on. Supposedly, even House Speaker Michael Madigan and Governor Bruce Rauner's top aides weren't part of it. It was just the two in a room together for about 40 minutes. So we don't know what went on. The reaction afterwards seemed to be pretty much more of the same. I don't know what the answer to all of this is, and I do believe that it gets harder with every day due to, of course, an election on the horizon next year. Perhaps there is one notion that could move things along, make things better. Who right now wants to run for office, particularly Governor Rauner, without any of these major successes, when everything has the asterisks of there's no budget. This is unprecedented, again, not just for Illinois, but nationally. There's never been anything like this. But I do believe that it becomes more difficult for any Republican legislator to sign on to a tax hike that is likely to be part of any sort of compromise. And it's far more difficult for Rauner to sign one as he's running for re-election. And on the other side, Democrats, I think, very much believe that they, despite the state's pain, could be advantaged by having no budget for really the entirety of Rauner's term in office, and therefore if they want to win that back, they have a kind of perverse, granted, incentive to prolong the impasse. So sorry again for that disappointing take, but calling it like I see it, and with that, I suppose part of the way that it can change is by hearing stories that do truly have a message for politicians about how people are affected by what is going on or isn't, as the case may be, in Springfield.
Again, thanks to our panel, and now it's your turn. We would like to hear from you tonight. You can just raise your hand if you'd like to share your story, or if you have a question for our panel, that'd be fine too. I do want to run through just a couple of quick ground rules. Let's try to keep things civil tonight. No attacking each other. Let's try to refrain from campaign speeches, things of that sort. That's really not what we're here for. We're here tonight to, try to get a feel for how this budget impasse is impacting people just like you. I do understand, though, emotions can run high on some of these topics, so we'll try to keep things in check as best we can tonight. Again, if you have a question, again, raise your hand, and I believe we have somebody right there. Go right ahead.
Good evening. First, I'd like to thank NPR and AARP for this platform for us to share our stories. My name is Teresa Collins. I drove nearly 2 hours tonight to be here from Southern Illinois, and I'm here to represent over 30,000 seniors that we service in St. Clair and Madison County who are too frail to come and make this journey. So I wanted to share a little bit about what's happened at our service agency. We are a 44-year-old nonprofit agency, again, located in Southern Illinois. And over the last 22 months, I'm sorry, I get pretty emotional, we have had devastating impact to the people we serve and to our community because of the budget impasse. We've had to close our transportation services, so hundreds of people who were getting rides to dialysis and therapy and work are no longer getting those rides. And those are people who, though there is public transportation, can't stand at a bus stop for long periods of time or get onto the bus without assistance. We served 650 people a day, hot meals that were 33 1/3% of their daily nutritional value through home delivered meals or Meals on Wheels. Because of the budget impasse, we've had to make significant changes and reductions to that program. We now serve just at 400 individuals. We deliver meals 1 day a week, and we deliver frozen meals that they have to reheat to try and reduce the cost of overhead for our agency so that we could continue to serve them the best we can. We've lost nearly 20% of our staff in those programs. Those are people who've been with our agency for years, and when we said and told them that their positions were being eliminated, they cried, not because their position was being cut, but because of the effects they knew it would have on the people that they served. We had an 84-year-old woman who asked me to come here tonight and on her behalf state that enough is enough. We have to have a budget.
Anybody on our panel want to follow up on that one?
Sure. Those are the truly, again, heartbreaking stories. And part of the difficulty in this is many a legislator, I think, recognizes that and hears it and sees it in their own community. It's not that, and I suppose it's also a difficulty of the narrative. What it has become, at least, is a budget impasse. And then these are the consequences of it. And yet, really at the heart of the matter, the fight isn't over the budget. I mean, they haven't really even had those discussions. It's not about a typical dollars and cents sort of budget fight that Illinois has seen in the past, or frankly, that most states at some point in time have experienced, particularly when you have divided government. It is instead, the fight's over something that has nothing to do really with that, at least in the short term. The governor would say it's part of long-term growth and saving the state from itself in the future. But I think that again is where it is such a difficulty, because any legislator that is down in Southern Illinois would say what they are doing, they believe, is the best answer for Illinois' future, and they are sticking to their beliefs, to their ideology. It gets back to what Bob said in the beginning. You know, no legislator says, yeah, I want this budget impasse to keep on going. It's just a matter of giving in and finding some sort of happy medium, and there are a lot of areas where I don't think there is a happy medium. I mean, you have a governor that says he really wants term limits to be there, believes in term limits. You very clearly have, it, particularly in Speaker Madigan, somebody who is not going to go along with term limits. What gives? That is, I think, part of the difficulty. The other thing that I would like to add is something that I think is very difficult to measure, but when you talk about staff being laid off, of course, they're concerned about the people that they provide for, but yeah, those are more people that are out of jobs. And particularly in communities like you talked about in downstate Illinois, particularly in rural areas, the spiral effect of that is a pretty horrific one. When you have a place where there aren't a ton of jobs, there aren't a lot of other places to get work, and you have individuals being laid off, there's nobody, in university towns as well, I think this is particularly exacerbated. When you have layoffs in a university town, that's a professor who's not able to pay a mortgage on his or her home. There isn't anybody likely to want to buy then that home. It has the consequences can only get worse from here. And again, I think they're very difficult to measure at this point in time, but Illinois will continue to suffer for what is going on outside of the sheer numbers and cents, but all of those consequences are something that you really, really can't forget.
But let me be a little bit redundant, or maybe a lot of bit redundant. The only reason and the only way this struggle can continue to go on is by officials being in denial about the truth of what's happening. They have to actually be in denial about the 80-year-old woman's story, in denial about and behave as though people who need to be fed and were getting fed are now either not getting fed or getting frozen meals rather than hot meals. And the reason it's important for all of us to get that is we have to be the ones to make them face up to the reality of the consequences of people not being able to get transportation or food, or universities in decay. It's unimaginable to have 5 public institutions in junk bond status. Now, most people don't relate to what it means to be in junk bond status, but it means that instead of being able to borrow operating dollars and money that you need for equipment and so forth at a reasonable rate, it means you pay hundreds of thousands, and in some instances, millions of dollars more to borrow than otherwise would have been the case. 5 universities in junk bond status. Now, to get the junk bond status, that means a lot of financial ruin has had to take place. And so the only way legislators can just do nothing is just kind of deny that these real consequences that will last for a decade are going on. And we have to tell them, we have to raise more concern and bring to their attention our real stories and the real pain and the real consequence of this, because it's in the context of that pressure that can allow Amanda to be optimistic that something will happen. It will not happen without pressure. They can wait until an election without pressure and without someone pushing before them the reality of the consequence of waiting.
If I can add this, I've heard legislators make statements specifically regarding social service programs. And the statement I'm going to make is pretty raw. The statement I've heard them make has been, well, you know what, at this point, we can't necessarily fund a lot of these human service and social service programs simply because we don't know. We need to evaluate if these dollars are being utilized effectively. So what's happening is, and one can make an assumption here, that the reason that they're so apt and comfortable to make that statement is because no one has held them accountable.
That's right.
Okay? But to just make that statement, and not only make that statement one-on-one, but to make that statement publicly in front of constituents as if it's okay. The other aspect I've got to put out there is, and maybe I'm cynical, matter of fact, I know that I am, and that's all right. Because at the end of the day, you have individuals who fail to realize that they themselves are taxpayers. You have individuals who may not be impacted by these issues. And as a result of that, Mr. Peters is correct. We have to make sure, and it becomes a cliche, to hold them accountable. We have seen the sit-ins at the Capitol. We have seen folks who have lined the governor's doorway and refused to leave and literally fell out playing as if they're dead to make a point. Do I think that that point has had an impact? Yes, it has. But it also shows you that there's an absolute crisis in confidence that we all are having with folks that we have put in office. But I know, at least for me, I have a responsibility as well. Again, I'm back to that term, accountability. And a lot of folks have said, well, how do I do that? Well, a lot of different ways. The one way to not hold someone accountable is to not say anything at all. And I think some folks have gotten used to that. And the more that they get used to that, they can make and say things such as, we'll just wait until the next election. We'll just keep putting this off. But you have folks that are dying. You have institutions that are closing. This is not a joke. To see that we are the last state in the country with no budget is not a laughing matter. And so that just proves the point that this dialogue that we're having right now, I know it's going to lead to something. It has to. And we're coming up and we're talking and we're dialoguing. But at some point, I am optimistic that this is going to change because I have no other way to be but optimistic. We've already seen the bottom.
All right, we want to keep going here. And again, we do want to dialogue, so we want to hear from you folks as well. Feel free to raise your hands. We'll get somebody around to you. I believe there's somebody here in the middle. Thanks, Teresa, and just keep going. That's fine.
My name's Jeffrey Davis, and I retired from the state of Illinois after working for rehabilitation services for 35 years. I happen to be living a pretty comfortable retirement. I don't have any sad stories to tell, although I worry every day about what may be coming down the road for me. I have written to my state rep, my state senator, Speaker Madigan, Senate President Cullerton, didn't hear from any of them. So then I made phone calls, and I have met with my state rep, and I'm in the process of trying to see Senator McCann and tell them what I think. I have more of an agenda in terms of what I think we should be doing. I think this state has such a deep hole to dig out of that we can't just cut budgets. I think we could eliminate every state university and we wouldn't cover the we wouldn't cover the money that we need to pay our back bills, I don't think. But we need to fund education better. I think we shouldn't be freezing property taxes. I think we need to expand our tax base in a number of ways. I have a sister-in-law in Indiana who pays $360 to renew her license every year. We pay $101, I think. In Wisconsin, you pay a fee to go to a state park. We don't do that here. I think there are a lot of things that we could do to bring money in that we need. And one of the more unpopular ideas that I have, and my wife would probably be throwing something at me here pretty quickly, but I think we should be taxing retirement income. Yeah, thank you. I knew I'd hear
But that
from
gets to
somebody.
part of the problem, right?
Go ahead. Be brave.
But and right there, I think, though, shows the difficulty of this issue politically. I mean, you just heard those groans. Many of you are retired. You don't want to pay that. But there is an equal side of business saying, hey, wait, I don't want to pay that. Or somebody who doesn't use a state park saying, hey, wait a second, I don't go to those. I don't want to have to pay for that. And therein lies the very issue that is at the heart of this mess, because you have two sides that very much, again, believe that they are in the right. And they're talking to people. They are hearing from people. They're hearing from many people that say, go, you're right on. Sorry,
Jeffrey,
go ahead.
I could just throw one more. Back in 1972, I hate to date myself, but President Nixon impounded our funds. And we had to make some really serious decisions in what was back then DVR. And we had to cut out things like heart surgery and tuition and fees and books and supplies. And I happened to have to make a speech to the American Heart Association in Peoria, and they booed me off the stage because I said, we're not going to pay for heart surgery anymore. But we had to make some stiff cuts to make things work. So at any rate, I'm going to continue trying to meet with my legislators and let them know what I think, and I appreciate your listening.
Well, I want to encourage you to do exactly that. I want to encourage you to continue to meet with your legislators, to write them, and do whatever else you can do to get them to your attention. That doesn't mean I agree with everything you said, but I think that, but that's what's important in this, is that legislators, elected officials know that somebody who votes is watching, and that we have expectations. And so it's less important to me whether I agree with you as much as that you agitate and that you make sure. Because one final point on this. When you think about it, the only way an elected official cannot care is if he or she knows you don't care.
You didn't get any responses back from your letters? Because that is shocking to me. They have constituency offices that do that. That's people's entire job responsibilities. Nobody wrote back to you? No. Wow. Yeah. Huh.
That is different.
I would say, too, just real quick, and Jonathan, I'll let you speak as well, but it strikes me some of these ideas that Jeffrey mentioned, they're not very popular, at least in this room, I guess. At the same time, those are the types of ideas that are going to become more reality, I think, as long as this continues down this path. As long as lawmakers don't want to make decisions and allow this to go on, they're going to have to do things like the parks, charging admissions, things nobody likes and nobody wants to see. The hands are going to be tied, I think.
I was just going to say, what I found powerful about the statement you made and what I found powerful about the reaction was the fact that, A, you put something on the table as a viable solution, whether we agree or not, and B, you got a reaction, okay? But I bring that up because it's easy to go to a legislator. Heck, it's easy to go to the governor and say, I don't like this. This is a problem. And then you walk away. But to leave something on the table for them to think about is important. It might mean an income tax increase. We don't like that. There might mean some other tax increases, sin taxes, what have you. But let me just, if I can leave you with a visual, and these numbers are not absolute, but when we're looking at this budget debacle, which is, I guess, the best word to use, you're actually looking right now, roughly, about $14 billion in unpaid bills, $10 billion deficit, 180, to your point about pension, $180 billion pension crisis. We've heard legislators talk about before, maybe we need to move away from this public-based pension system and move more to an investment-based pension system, okay? My first reaction when I heard that was, wait a minute, that could mean the virtual collapse of the public-based pension system. What happens next? But then I had to kind of eat crow and look at myself and say, but at least there's something on the table for it to be discussed. Now, we haven't heard much about that since, but let me just leave you with this. The one thing about pension and the pension crisis in Illinois, at least from Jonathan's vantage point, is in order for us to climb out of this hole, we have to, number one, remember it's not going to be easy to climb out. It's not going to happen overnight because we didn't get in this situation overnight. But the more important thing is we have to address the pension issue, and we can't be afraid to address it. It's going to be a lot of hurt and pain, and I think Mr. Peters would even agree with this. If you go back in time and if you look at Governor Edgar's administration, really early on in his administration, he took a lot of heat for a lot of the plans and things that he was putting in place to try to save the economy. And then at the end of his term, we were in a surplus. But it took pain to get there, and everyone didn't agree, but we got there eventually.
Again, feel free to raise your hand. We'd like to hear from you, and even if it's not impacting you directly, that'd be fine. Here we go.
Hey, my name is Roger Schlichting, and I live here in Springfield. I've been a resident of Illinois my whole life. And as I was listening to the opening comments, I realized that I don't really understand how the budget is supposed to work, the budget process, and how it worked for, well, up until 2 years ago. It's been said several times now that this is the first time since the state of Illinois was started that we haven't had a budget. So if one or more panel members could tell me how is it supposed to work and where has that process broken down so severely that we've been without a budget for 22 months now.
I will say Charlie Wheeler and I talk about this a lot, how they were able to get a budget when Pate Phillip and Michael Madigan were in the same room together trying to work something out. You couldn't get farther apart than those two guys, and yet they got something done. So whoever wants to take that.
I'll do the easy part. I'll talk about how it's supposed to work, and someone else can tell you how it went off the rail. Basically, how it's supposed to work. And I should say that this isn't the first time that Illinois has had a budget impasse. What's different about this one is in the past, budget impasse lasted 30 days, 45 days, and people, in essence, came to themselves and passed the budget. It's the fact that we've gone through entire fiscal years without a budget that's so unique now. But in essence, what's supposed to happen is the governor in February will offer to the legislature a budget. And the Constitution says he or she will offer to the legislature a balanced budget. And then the horse trading is to start from there, because nobody is going to agree with everything that a governor says. The governor may say, in order to do some things that are priorities, I'm going to reduce some funding that we did for some other things in order to pay for that. And someone's ox just got gored, and they don't want those reductions to happen. But basically, back and forth dialogue, give and take takes place over about the last decade, the legislative leaders, the Republican leader, the Democrat leader in the House, the Republican leader and the Democrat leader in the Senate would meet with the governor, and they would begin to horse trade, if you will, to work out, to come to some consensus. There was also a group of folks called the budgeteers, and those were the staff people who actually do the work in great detail. They would meet literally every day during February, March, April, and getting into May, working out the details of what their leaders thought were important to get into the budget. And so sometimes toward the end of May, it would begin to come together. People would have put their stake in the ground and decided, here's what I'm willing to give up, here's what I'm not willing to give up. And sometimes it would get all the way to the 31st of May before the final deal were done. And it's a hard process. I don't want to make this sound like an easy process at all, but through that process, a result would occur where usually nobody is altogether pleased, because that's what compromise takes, getting some of what you want and giving up some of what you want. So that's the way the process is designed to work. The governor has the first bite of the apple. The governor offers a budget and says, this is the direction the state should go in. This is how the budget should be balanced. These are the spending priorities. And the legislature works it through a committee process, the discussion process. The meeting of the tops is what the legislative leaders and the governor will always refer to. And eventually, they would come to a compromise and make a decision. Some of what has happened now, to just start down the path of how it got off the rail, is some of what is different this go around is that the discussion hasn't been just about the budget and the spending priorities and how to pay for it. It's become about some other things as well.
Yeah, I'll briefly kind of add on in terms of where it went wrong and what I got back to in the beginning when I said that the budget fight isn't really about the budget. All of those, kind of gives and takes in the horse tradings that Howard just mentioned, that's what hasn't truly gone on. And part of it would say that it hasn't worked in the past, that what Illinois did to get a budget, I mean, it's clearly better than what we have now, because nothing is not how it's supposed to work, not just in Illinois, but again, nationally. I mean, this is so unprecedented. I cannot stress that enough, how this is really not how it's supposed to be, but that they didn't truly balance the budget in previous years. That's why you have a deficit that runs every year, period, and plus this pension backlog, overspending in the past. So truly, when the governor says, hey, I didn't create this mess, he's right. I mean, he didn't create all of it. It's just that while Rauner has been at the helm, we've been in this 666 days of massive uncertainty, and that is because the governor has tied his signing a tax increase into law, which Democrats don't say it this bluntly, but basically they, as do many others, believe, even Rauner himself will sort of kind of nibble at the edges of admitting this, that a tax hike is necessary to balance the budget because of that long back buildup of deficits and pension backlog. And he has tied his signing onto that to a series of other changes that were originally, he kind of lost the term, but turnaround agenda. So that's term limits, workers' compensation overhaul, generally loosely termed anti-union, pro-business measures, and also he says reforming government, basically get Madigan out of there with term limits and changing how legislative districts are drawn. These are all things that Democrats are opposed to, either because of politics, it would disadvantage them politically, or because they have ideological opposition to it. So that's where truly there is a loggerheads, and why the budget battle isn't just about the budget. It is about so much more. It truly is, I think, about the future of Illinois, where it's going to go, and also political power.
If I can add, I think there's another ancillary issue to that. And, when we talk deficit, I think one of the issues we've had in Illinois for a while is what's the true deficit? So from an economic forecasting perspective, we've seen numbers bantered back and forth. And one day that deficit might be $6 billion. The next day it may balloon to $10 billion. Then the next day it may say, no, it's really $4 billion. Which one is it? And I think that's created a schism, for lack of a better term. That's created a problem. Because if we don't necessarily know what the true deficit is in the state of Illinois, historically, then it's very difficult for us to know, really, cash on hand. It's very difficult to know how can we actually institute a budget. And so we have seen administrations in the past that have said, for example, well, you know what, I know that we can hold the budget flat because we predict that we're going to have X amount of million or maybe billions of dollars in corporate tax receipts coming into the state of Illinois. But that's not an actual. And I think that has lent to the issue in the state in terms of where we are now. Until we can honestly know what that number is, then maybe we can truly get to a point of having a definitive number and hopefully a balanced budget.
Let me make one other point in terms of why we are off the track. This is really, really hard stuff. And most people who run for office aren't really prepared to do really, really hard stuff. The gentleman stood up and said, here are some things I'm willing to do, knowing that some of us were going to boo. Most elected officials, feeling that in their hearts, would not come into this room and own that. Right. Because it's hard stuff. How hard is it? And this is, and so when if you're going to get involved and really push for a decision, a couple of things to keep in mind. When there is a budget for the state of Illinois, and there will be a budget,
Eventually.
I dare to say, no one in this room will like it. I already know I won't like it. Because why? First of all, here's what we're asking the legislature and the governor to do. If we just accept Jonathan's number that there's $14 billion in unpaid bills and $10 billion deficit and $180 billion in shortfall in the pension fund, that's a lot of cash. What that means then is, for us to actually have a balanced budget, is the governor and the legislature would have to get together and raise a lot of taxes. They'd have to do at least some of the things my friend was saying, and that won't be enough. They'll have to do some other things. They'll have to charge me taxes on my haircuts and all of that.
And cut programs.
Wait, I'm coming to that. First, you'd have to say to legislators who don't want to vote for a tax increase to vote for a tax increase. A lot of it. Usually, when legislators vote for a tax increase, they do so in exchange for saying, I'm voting for this, I don't like it, but because I'm voting for this, we're going to get to do a lot of good stuff. We're going to fix the pothole on your street. We're going to feed the elderly. Their meals will no longer be frozen. But in this instance, they're going to have to say, we're going to vote for a lot of increases of taxes and still have to cut a lot of stuff. So you're asking them to do what legislators and elected officials have no appetite for. I can cut to say, by doing so, I won't raise your taxes. I can raise your taxes and say, by doing so, I'll give you some new good stuff. These folks are going to have to say, I'm going to take some money from you and give you nothing for it. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to have to take some stuff back that we're doing that you like.
And I want to really quickly, I know we need to move on from that, but I want to add to that, in addition to everything that you just said, it is with the prospect, therefore, of losing their job because you're going to boo, not only boo, but potentially vote for somebody else because you're not going to like all of that. So there's that on the horizon. And again, they really don't get along. I mean, what is going on right now, Democrats and Republicans are not digging each other either individually or their answer to all of these solutions. So when you're trying to do these really difficult things, it's not like it's with your family or your friends and you're going through something tough together, but yay, they don't like each other, trust each other. They all want this to end, but they don't want to do it together. So it makes it all the more difficult.
So it's just easier for me to blame Amanda.
That's always the media's
Long
fault,
as you
right?
will blame, as long as you will buy it.
All right, we do have a lot of
don't.
people who I believe do want to speak, and we have about a half an hour or so left, so want to get to as many as possible, so we'll just kind of keep going around the room. I think we have somebody in the middle here. Anyone you want. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Hi, John.
My name's John Meyer, and I'm from Springfield. I've heard experts say that a progressive income tax would have a favorable impact on the budget deficit. Is that true, and why does this never come to pass in the state of Illinois?
Well, it's true that a progressive income tax would produce money and therefore could have a favorable impact on the mathematics of it. Why it doesn't happen is because the people who would be in that higher bracket who have to pay this more money are not for that. And so much so that when the state constitution was put together, they anticipated that there would come a day, John, when somebody would say, let's have a progressive income tax. It's in the Constitution that no, let's not do that, let's have a flat tax. So you literally in Illinois would have to change the state constitution in order to do that. And that's a challenge, but yes, there's a lot of argument to be made that a progressive income tax is one of the ways to approach solving this problem. Others would argue that, you know, people will leave Illinois because they have money to could afford to do so, that it would have an effect on jobs and so forth. So the argument's on both sides. But yes, a progressive income tax would definitely put more dollars on the table.
Okay, let's stay in the crowd if we could here, and I believe it's somebody in the front row here that is wanting to speak.
Hi.
Oh, go ahead.
Amanda, it's good to see you again.
Thank you.
About time you got back down in Springfield. My name is Bob Tiemann. I am the Executive Director for the Illinois Association of Community Care Program Home Care Providers, and I'm also the Legislative Analyst for the Illinois Adult Day Services. Lack of a budget is forcing providers who have been in business for 34 and 35 years to close their doors.
And longer.
It's taking seniors and it's putting them in jeopardy. It's putting people out on the street in terms of people that worked, as Teresa has said before. And the other thing is a lack of a budget, and the fact we're talking $14 billion in unpaid bills now. By the end of 2018, that could be $25 billion. Guess who's going to pay for that? Our grandchildren. Our grandchildren. Not us, our grandchildren, because it'll take a while to get done. The longer that we go without a budget, the worse this gets. It is time that the parties decide that it is no longer a party situation, but that it is representing the state and the people. The other thing that was stated is that you need to speak up. I got in trouble years ago. I've been doing this for 40 years. I got in trouble because I said publicly, and I'll say it again, as far as legislators, you put them there, you can take them out. If they are not doing their jobs, they need to be voted out. We need to have a budget. They need to put personal things aside. They need to work together. They need to negotiate. They need to compromise. Something that seems to be dead in this state. It needs to come back. But if it doesn't change soon, the network for the seniors will disappear. The universities will find themselves in even graver situations. And we will find more people leaving the state of Illinois, more businesses leaving the state of Illinois, rather than keeping them in here. The actions need to be done now, not by 2018.
Thanks, Bob.
Hi, my name's Carolyn Cochran-Copel. I'm a retired state employee. And I can tell you I worked twice in the Governor's Bureau of the Budget, once under the Thompson administration, once under the Edgar administration, which they're both Republicans, as ostensibly as our current governor. And so I can tell you that the things that Howard's talking about are real, these real conversations, these real negotiations. And at the end, even when it all happened, the governor then has line item veto authority. And a lot of people don't realize that. The governor can still balance the budget if he feels it comes to him out of balance. And I participated in that process. It's real, it's happened, other governors have done it. He has that authority. He could line item veto the budget instead of outright veto it, so we could have the budget right now. And one of the main things about where it went off the rails, I think, is when all the court orders came through to pay state employees and pay certain providers and whatever. And so the crisis always was in those years when we would go 45 days or whatever, and it was a crisis because we couldn't pay people. And the first crisis was when state payrolls couldn't be made. And so, you know, if they weren't done by the end of June and we went into July, it was a crisis. So all of those court orders have done several things. The people who can get a court order because they have some standing, a judge decides, like they have a Medicaid service or they're a state employee or whatever, they're getting paid. But the people who don't have a standing are getting nothing. So if you're a homeless youth shelter, if you're a rape crisis program, I mean, are we saying as a state, we don't believe that homeless children should be provided for? That we think that women who've been raped should not be protected and counseled and provided services and court assistance? Is that what we say as a state? That we're ready to stand for this? And don't be fooled when people tell you that there's, oh, we're going to cut the fat. That's how we're going to do it. I'm telling you that the budgets have been cut as long as I've known, and they're cut as much as they can be. I mean, you can say, like somebody said a minute ago, you know, close all the state universities, it's not enough money. You know, and things are cut now below the level at which you can cut more. And every one of us, we all have a point in the budget at which no matter how tight our budget is, we're going to get our hair done. No matter how tight the budget is, I can afford a six-pack a week. Okay? Everybody's got something that no matter how tight your budget is, you're going to do. And then that would probably be true in the state. No matter how far, you know, how tight it is, there's going to be things they're going to do probably that somebody's not going to agree with. But they really don't have room in these budgets to cut. We can't cut our way out of this. We can't look for efficiencies or whatever. We can't cut our way out of it. So we're going to have to make those hard decisions. But tell your legislators, tell the governor, they have to work together. And the governor can control this, and the governor is the governor. And I realize that there's people on both sides of this issue, but the governor needs to govern.
I'm Bernell Heineke. I wear several hats. One is an ex-newspaper man who first saw Bill Stratton sworn in as governor. And I have worked 23 years with the Chicago Sun-Times. That was why I was here then and why I've been in and out of the Capitol through various administrations. And then I left to become a state employee in the state treasurer's office. And eventually, I was budgeted out by Governor Edgar, where I was in the Department of Labor. My point is we need to remember a critical point about how did we get into this growing deficit, or whatever you want to call it. And that takes us back to the December of 2014, when the vote was made to let the income tax, temporary income tax, lapse. And since then, we've been living on what I called, what people on credit card would say. We're paying the minimum balance on the account because we are working off of an income level from our state income tax from 2014 with a little bit of an increase there as the governor coming in said originally that he would take that larger income tax and reduce it at the end of 4 years. He would reduce it back to where it was in 2014. That's where things started when the first budget we really presented from Governor Rauner was supposedly balanced basically on the a pension problem we had. Ever since then, we talk other ethereal things, and we don't get back to that recognition that we're not taking in what we could really have been doing all this time, and everything keeps growing. And by the time, if you remember, the group that's in the Senate, they've discussed various things, including that reference to retirement income. But I think there is dishonesty on the part of the governor now this week, talking about solving our problems without any tax increase. Well, let's start with basically with the legislators. It's really more of a restoration, and then we're going to have a surtax of many varieties probably because of all this other mismanagement, because of the ego battle and that sort of thing. But I also want to say that I'm prejudiced. I have about 38 years now, Western Illinois University Foundation Board. And the thing is, honesty at the level of higher education should not be debated any longer.
Thank you.
Yes. I could.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? My name is John Sanford, and earlier this year, when the legislature proposed a grand bargain, it sounded to me like there was some hope to get a budget. But I know two bills in that grand bargain budget that will adversely affect the general revenues and school funding. Senate Bill 7 is to expand 6 casinos, but hidden down in the bottom of the bill is a reduction in license fees and taxes for gambling throughout the state. And a state agency on forecasting reviewed that bill, and they said that it will adversely affect the general revenue fund and school funding. I called my state legislator about that, and I asked if anyone else has called in to complain. Nobody else has called in to complain. It's because we really don't know what the legislature is doing underhand in all the bills. One other bill in the grand bargain for pensions actually lowers the contribution amount for state employees. Now, how's that going to help pay off the pension budget deficit? We need to call our state legislators and complain about their dishonesty, because that's exactly what it is.
Mr. Bailey.
Thank you, John.
Hi, my name's Rick Penio, and I'm a retired state employee. I worked at Illinois Environmental Protection Agency for 32 years. And as part of being a state employee, I had to choose insurance, and I chose SIU School of Medicine, the Blue Cross Blue Shield HMO of Illinois. And I'm sorry to say that SIU School of Medicine's graduating class would normally have a very large number of doctors stay in Illinois. This year, that is not the case. I'm also sorry to say that a number of the teachers that were teaching there had left that university, and that is another sad state of affairs. One other thing that I would like to say is about the pension system. I'm not sure when it happened, but apparently there was a law that was passed a number of years back that basically said that 90% of the people that are working now and into the future to a certain date would have to be fully funded by their pension system. And if you ask any actuary if that's a sound way of going about doing things, they will say no. And I think one of the biggest problems with the pension is this law that's in place right now that's set up for the system to fail. And I believe that if that is changed, you'll see the numbers on the pension debt go down drastically. Thank you.
Another gentleman right over here.
Thank you, Rick.
Right here.
My name is Steve Swafford. I am a current state employee. Not for very long, fortunately. I was in private practice for years and years, and have only been with the state a short time, so I don't have to rely on my state pension that I will never get.
My man.
But 2 years before he ran for governor, our current governor gave a speech in which he said, "I will make it so painful for the people who need social services that the Democrats will have to give in to what I want them to do to organize labor." And the nice lady back there that said we should put the heat on the legislatures, yes, that's true. But the man who doesn't care is the governor. And when he has a calculated agenda to cause harm to the most vulnerable people for his political agenda, that's wrong. Now, Mr. Peters said, well, the legislators don't want to do hard things because they feel they will be at risk of losing their job. Our governor had $157 million of outside income and doesn't take his state salary. You think he's got any real skin in this game? Now, I have always been of the opposite political party of Governor Edgar and that nice lady who spoke back there. But what has always happened in the past, Jim Edgar had a long and distinguished career as a public servant. And he had skin in the game about eventually making something work. And the man we have there suffers no personal consequences whatsoever if he is voted out of office. And therefore, he can personally afford not to care. But I don't think we as Illinoisans who do care, who love our state and who care about the people of our state, can tolerate that kind of approach anymore.
Hi, I'm Mike Kirshner, and really, we need the press, and not just NPR, which does a wonderful job, and PBS, but we need the local news media and all of you to really educate the people. Our governor has an agenda that really isn't related directly to the budget, but indirectly it is, but needs to be treated separately. And it goes all the way back, just a real quick lesson. I used to have 3 reps in my area, and they gave themselves a pay raise in the 70s, and Pat Quinn came along and said, "Isn't that terrible?" And everybody voted to reduce our representatives from 3 to 1. And in my district, I always had, whether I was a Democrat or Republican, Out of those 3 reps, I always had one person that was a Democrat or Republican. Out of those 3 I could talk to. And we had in Chicago a Republican in the city, and when the Democrats in Chicago got out of hand, those Republicans in the city could say to the reps, could say, hey, you're hurting me, let's work this out, and it worked out. Pat Quinn got that passed because he told you people, look, they raised their salaries. This is a good deal to reduce the legislature. Get rid of those people. What you did was, everybody that voted for that allowed the leaders of both parties to control the legislators. Our legislators, I can tell you, mine are scared of our governor because the money he has to threaten them with, whether they don't support him or support him. And some Democrats will tell you the same thing with the Democrat leadership. My friends hear term limits and they say, oh, that's great, that'll solve our problems. Term limits, Charlie Wheeler's pointed out, I believe, he went back from, I think, 2007 to 2017, and he said a third, or only 33 are left in the House of Representatives, I believe he said, out of what, if it was 100 or whatever, and the Senate is the same way, basically, almost. I tell my friends that, and they say, oh, well, term limits. Right to work. Sounds good. My friends say right to work. Right to work means to work for less and also work without benefits and contracts. Okay? Freeze the property taxes. Our governor's saying that. Okay? Our schools, public schools, live on property taxes. Our higher education does. You know, our governor goes around and says, Illinois is a terrible place to live. Well, who would want to move here when it's a terrible business climate? You know, and you know, we had a grand bargain to Cullerton and I believe Radagio's credit tried to get, and our governor killed it. He claimed he didn't, but he did, and because it didn't have his things. So you really need to educate the people around you because, you know, a lot of these things he's talking about, people think it sounds good, and it's our fault because we want an easy solution. And these gentlemen up here pointed there is an easy solution. I'm not going to like it either, but a lot of these people aren't getting educated. They just hear rounder term limits, right to work. All those buzzwords sound good, and that's all they are buzzwords. And, you know, we got a governor that went to an Ivy League school, and he drops his G's to say, I'm going, instead of going, because he wants to sound like one of us. He's no way like one of us. One last thing. And why I'm really worried, and we've got a guy running for governor, it's a billionaire, and Rauner's going to hammer him. He's a billionaire and doesn't understand that. And we got Rauner, who made, like they said, $180 million last year, I believe, said he didn't know where the money came from because it's in a blind trust. We're getting to, as a society, where if you're not a multimillionaire, you can't represent these states. These people are getting in, and then they're saying to our representatives, if you disagree with me, I'm going to make you pay financially. We're going the wrong way, folks.
I will say really quickly, I interviewed...
Real quick, can I just see some hands? If anybody still wants to speak, I want to make sure we try to get to as many as possible. Okay, go ahead.
I'm Penny Wallen-Creel, and I'm from Springfield, and I'm going to address Mr. Lackland for a question. My concern with higher education is yes, there are students who are not going to attend the Illinois universities, but I have a greater concern about the faculty who is going to be fleeing, as they did, those nationally and internationally known scholars, as they did from the Illinois State Museum when the museum was closed. Do you know at this point what is, you know, what's the rumor and what's happening with the faculty who are, you know, if we don't have a faculty of that kind of renown, we're not going to have the students, and it's no wonder that they would be fleeing.
That's an outstanding point. As a matter of fact, that is the #1 point that almost every public university president raises in their appropriation hearings. I can tell you at Illinois State University, I'll give you one example. We had a husband and wife team, professors, who for years, plural, had opportunities to go to Harvard University. Harvard came after them very aggressively, and each year they told them no. Because of the pension, because of the fiscal uncertainty, we have now lost that husband and wife team. We are losing faculty. This does go well beyond the students. And the difficulty is if we're asked, well, how can we retain these faculty, it's tough. It is very difficult to have a faculty member come to you and say, should I retire or not? Because I've been at this institution for 30 years. I'm making $50,000, $60,000 a year, and I don't have enough to retire on. But what's even more unconscionable about that is that we have had legislators come to us as institutions, and they've said to us, your faculty make way too much money. I don't see where. So what incentive do we honestly have to keep our faculty here? When we do undergo a search for faculty, really the number one question we get is, well, what's going on with your budget? If I decide to come to your institution, will I legitimately be able to stay? And ISU, granted, is a different institution because we put in the fiscal, not to say any other institution hasn't, but we started years ago to do the reductions so that we could at least have a reserve that I might add, come next year, I can't have the same discussion with you about our healthy reserve because it probably will be depleted, potentially. However, these are the things that we are having to message to our faculty, both existing faculty and those that are coming in the door. The sad thing with your question is I cannot give you a definitive answer. And the only way for me to give you a definitive answer is if we could say that we had a sustainable budget that we knew could retain the folks that we need to keep the brain trust here in Illinois, to make sure that we are training these individuals to go into the workforce, to do the things that our business and industry partners are saying that they want us to do.
Hello, I'm Bill Power, retired state employee. And if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't know what state we are in, or where it came from, or how it's developed up to that point. Two general statements is what a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and majority rules. If the majority could see what is going on, and it affected them personally, they may look upon this differently and actually do something. How do you educate the majority that the minority are in a stress point, and how it will affect them? That's my question.
Whoever wants to take that.
You in the media.
Yeah, I know that particularly NPR Illinois has, including with this discussion, but had an open call, for example, let us know how the budget is impacting you. I know myself as a journalist, I want to hear those stories, I want to tell those stories, and so I think that's really a key part of it. It's, as we've talked about, continuing to communicate to your legislators so that they aren't making these decisions blind or not making decisions, again, as the case may be, because really that's what it is. They're just putting it off and not doing anything. But the more that they hear about it, the more that the public at large hears about it. I do think that it is also difficult because you can't easily measure these things. When we talk about faculty leaving for other universities, we're aware anecdotally that happens, but fortunately, I don't have a lot of professors, calling me up and saying, hey, listen, I'm leaving, I'm amazing, I'm brilliant, but I'm out of here. That's just not how that goes. But yes, if people tell the stories about how the budget directly impacts them, I think that does spread some sort of acknowledgement, particularly there are some cases where people might say, well, hey, why is that the government's responsibility in the first place? There are people that question if social services are effective, if grant money is going to institutions that truly deserve it. That is part of the conversation in the Capitol, and I think there are some members of the public that have those concerns also. So the way that also is part of the discussion. And you have now budgeting for results. That's an ongoing conversation at the Capitol and committees that I don't know how that will change things. I think really what another difficult part of this whole budget situation right now is that none of the hard things. So I interviewed the governor actually earlier this week, and asked him about why he drops his G's. I asked that question. I kind of felt silly given the gravity of all the important affairs in the state right now, but you had to ask because I get that more than any budget question. Why does he talk like that? So anyway, give it a listen. But he said that he believes that, this is success to him, and he thinks that, for example, higher education needs to do some soul searching, tightening its belt, particularly in the administration area. What I questioned to him, and again, the kind of sad point is that none of those things are happening right now because all of the air in the Capitol is sucked by the impasse. So instead of using these 22 months, these past couple of years, to maybe reconfigure, instead it's just kind of leaving everything to die in the vine.
I'm going to, before we move along here, I'll let our panel have sort of a final word. I think we have one more person who wants to speak, and then we'll wrap things up.
Hello, my name is Jerry Lambert, and I wanted to share that my wife and I both work with state government and retired from state government. We both had to change our physicians because they left. Our specialist physician left because of the budget mess and problems that's going on. We know we're not the only family who's been affected in this way. We would like to encourage the governor and the legislature to come together to reason one with another to resolve this problem. It's really devastating, not only to us, but to many others. I'd like to thank you all for allowing us the opportunity to share our personal stories and our concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. And once again, I'm going to give our panel any last word here if they have one. Or do we have somebody else who wants to speak?
Yeah,
okay, we'll do that. Go ahead.
To sum it up, Ed Schoenbaum, Springfield, Illinois, long time, retired state employee. What are the 3 things that we all should do?
Call our representatives over and over.
Okay.
Not just us, our friends.
Any panelists?
Okay.
The 3 things, and you've sort of said them earlier, but to wrap it up tonight.
That'd be good, and we can.
Thank
You
you
guys can say that as your closing remarks if you'd like.
I mean, the first thing in terms of what do you do is let your voice be heard, and it becomes a cliche after a while, but it's at a crisis point, to the point where I say it's a revolution, but that's just me. But we have to make it so. We have to hold these folks accountable. That's number 2. And number 3, going back to my friend here, is putting some solutions on the table. I want to offer this. From a higher ed perspective, institutions in this state have been blasted. We have actually been told by legislative leadership that we need to talk the doom and gloom, that we don't do enough of that. The reason that you haven't seen many institutions talk the doom and gloom is because that's going to hinder enrollment. If I say that the sky is falling and the doors are closing, no student's going to come here. That's a problem. And so we have to reverse that accountability back to the folks that it needs to be reversed to. I think also at the end of the day, we have talked about bond ratings, credit ratings, and what have you. It's serious. Even though you have some institutions that have a healthier reserve than others, that doesn't mean that that's going to be forever. And so just as we're asking you to let your voice be heard, I can guarantee you that we're doing the same thing. So we are practicing what we preach. And so I guess practicing what you preach would be the 4th, if I can add a 4th to the list.
My answer to that would be, selfishly, I suppose, call me, tell me stories. I mean, it really is, I was saying, if you get the message out to the public about how you are affected, when people realize that it is not just a small minority of people, that somebody that they know, that they care about, their neighbor, their loved one, is affected by what is going on, that helps because, you can relate to somebody that you know. But tell the media, call us, and make us aware so that we can then use our platform, our microphones, to tell that story in a broader perspective. Also vote. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about writing letters and calling, and that of course certainly is effective, but it's voting, running for office, being engaged, all of that. A letter is not worth as much as a vote. When you see who wins election and why, I'm not making any prescriptions as to who should stay and who should go, merely that there often, you see a lot of incumbents returning, because you're familiar with them. Be educated, perhaps, on an opponent. If you're not happy with what is going on now, figure out why that is, what you do and don't stand for, and exercise your right to vote. And also, I guess I would say, accept the pain and realize that, yes, there may be a program that you care about that is going to be diminished or gone, even, again, when a budget is finally agreed upon, and realize that more money will probably be coming out of your pockets for that. And so I think part of it is also having a wider perspective of not just your own life situation, but that there are plenty of others that are part of this discussion, and maybe trying to open your eyes to that in a broader sense, to realize what all is at play in the Capitol.
Again, because we're at the end, let me thank NPR and AARP for making this happen. These kind of discussions are critically important, because as the gentleman asked, how do we educate people? It's in situations like this. You can't rely on Facebook and other social media for information. You really need to involve and invest yourself into really learning what's going on. I do want to pick up on Amanda's point about voting. Because I spent so long in state government, I know that whether you register or not and vote matters. If you're not a registered voter, you really don't count. You really don't matter. As cold as that seems to sound, because from an elected official's perspective, if you're not registered, you can't help me and you can't hurt me. And then the next important thing, and I've said it before, is that, and some of you have talked about whether or not people care. Everybody cares about something. They just may not care about what I care about. But if you agitate, if you make sure that your voice is heard, what you care about will begin to shape what people who want your vote care about and think about. And so involvement, continuous active involvement, is critically important. People are counting on you to run out of patience and to give up. Don't let them win. And if you stay involved and don't give up, better things and good things will happen. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
I want to thank our panel again, Jonathan Lackland, Amanda Vinicky, and also Howard Peters.
I want to go see a
And also thanks to all of you for coming out tonight, letting your voices be heard. Thanks to AARP as well for helping support this, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks.
If you give me your card next time I
Oh,
see
sure.
you, I'll let you know.
I will.